Hey everyone.
Too early. You're too early, Owen. Yeah, let's do this. September. September Loki. I'm gonna share this window because I got some important stats to cover here. I'm pretty excited about this.
We need to
Out
set
of
up a bot to announce this in Slack and Twitter and stuff. Like
uh,
half the weeks I forget to do it.
it sneaks up on you, even though it's
Yeah.
once a month. But I think it's important to note that out of the Tempo and Loki and Grafana community calls of last month, that we did get the most likes. Although Grafana got slightly more views than we did. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you know what to do. You know what to do. When you want to kick us off, talk about out of order. I think that's what everybody's here for.
Sure. So yeah, big out of order update. Out of order is actually live in Grafana Cloud in all production clusters. So if you are using Grafana Cloud right now, you can actually send out of order data with up to 1 hour tolerance. This is very exciting for us. There may be a few things that we tweak here and there, but largely we're pretty happy with it. We've been testing this for a long time, but it's been live for over a week at this point. I ran a couple stats in one of our production clusters and found out that by traffic, by byte volume, we were experiencing about 1.5% of our ingestion traffic was being rejected due to out of order. And then that dropped basically down to 0 afterwards. This is largely because when you see out of order errors, most of the time it's a second or two out of order, maybe up to a minute, but usually nothing longer than that. This makes it the out of order tolerance now makes it a lot easier to get logs from other agents that aren't ordering aware, that don't have the concept of Loki's ordering constraint or previous ordering constraint. So things like Fluent are probably our biggest ones there, but we've also seen things with Vector and FluentBit, FluentD, all that sort of stuff. So that should pretty much work a lot better out of the box now, and should play nicely with retries and site network interruptions and all sorts of fun stuff. That's going to also be included in the 2.4 release, which we're looking at cutting pretty quickly, but I won't give I'm not going to give a date for that yet. Yeah, let's see. Anything else I missed? There's a couple other use cases for out of order that we're excited about, particularly reviving the AWS Lambda logs and other sort of hyper ephemeral service logs getting into Loki. But there should be a little bit more information about that maybe at the next community call. We're still fleshing a few things out internally.
Is K61 or K60? I figured if someone wanted to play around with out of order, that either of those is probably.
I think
K61 is new this week, though, right?
Yeah, we don't have that in production yet. I think we have K60 in production.
Let me find an image for K60 then.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll find an image and put it in probably. Yeah, later during the call asynchronously.
I'm gonna make everybody wait while I look for this image.
Yeah, exactly.
One sec, guys. That's just right here.
I can take care of that after we've gone through some of my sections.
I got it.
Okay.
You mentioned 2.4, so I injected that in here. So our tentative plans are probably to try to do a 2.4 release. I'm not sure. Every time I say a date, it's always wrong, but let's say by the end of the month, hopefully a little sooner than that. And the out of order stuff will be released as probably as beta, although as Owen mentioned, we are running it in prod, so we're pretty confident in its ability already. But 2.4, so yeah, hopefully end of September or sooner. And Also, that should include porting rules. Segue that over to you, Danny.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, in 2.3, we released the initial experimental version of recording rules for Loki. So in case you don't know what that is, that's a way to evaluate logql queries on an interval. And if you use a metric query that produces a whole bunch of samples, and we can send those to Prometheus, so you can have a time series of metrics that come out of those. And that's really useful if you've got queries that touch a lot of data, so you can run those queries on very short intervals over a short time range and get your metrics out that way. So an improvement that's coming to recording rules soon is durable storage for those samples that it generates. So the current version in v2.3 only buffers the samples in memory before remote writing them off to Prometheus. And the new version will support a write-ahead log. And this is reusing a lot of code from Prometheus's write-ahead log. And that will result in a more durable storage for those samples. So if the ruler crashes at any point in time, you won't lose the samples that were evaluated by those recording rules. Go ahead, Jean-Christophe.
Actually, it's my first time. I didn't know if I had to raise my hand to speak or I could speak freely. It was about the out of the order. Now that it's working, does it mean that we can try to fill up the chunks at the maximum, which is, I guess, better to have instead of to have a lot of chunks, which are, in my case, usually really small, to try to fill them up. And to the opposite, can it produce some other issue if I try to put a lot of logs into the same chunk?
Yeah, it actually out of the out of order tolerance actually allows you to make more efficient chunks now, because you don't have to fight between ordering and cardinality as much, which is basically exactly what you're describing. So previously, people would be incentivized to create labels, extra labels, effectively, to ensure that the ordering constraint wasn't broken. But now that that's not as strict anymore, you can generally remove labels. And we're actually kind of in the process of, there's still kind of an outstanding to-do item to remove a couple labels from some of our default Promtail configs as well, now that this is kind of a new feature. So you're exactly right. You can definitely do that, and it should help make the rest of Loki more efficient by reducing your index size and reducing the amount of things that you need to kind of merge at query time.
Okay, because now that I don't have the out of order issue, I see other issue where I seem to actually, for the same stream, it seems that I really fill them up, and I can't remember the issue, but there is a 1 megabyte size per stream, and it seemed that in some case for me, I fill up this 1 megabyte size.
Yeah, that's I guess there's not a strict science to when we add labels to split up to split streams or remove them. We generally try to prefer less streams that are more filled. And so if you're actually filling up your chunks and you're flushing a lot of your chunks because they're full, that's actually usually a really good sign. It can in certain situations, like if you tried to log everything into one stream, that would obviously not be very ideal. So if you're hitting if you're pretty consistently hitting the chunks being flushed due to size, but you're not experiencing any bad effects of that, then that's great. And bad effects could be like having a couple ingesters tip over if you tried to log everything to one stream, for instance, because you would only be split across replication factor number of ingesters. That is also largely going to be less of a problem now, because we have per stream rate limits, which are being introduced alongside the out of order tolerance to basically prevent people from accidentally tipping their clusters over. So as long as you're not being rate limited and you're flushing chunks, you're in a really good spot.
Okay, but what happened when I get, actually I don't have the error in mind, but I told you, when I hit this limit on the client side, does it mean that it needs to retry, or the log is just as before discarded?
Which error is this we're talking about?
I mean, any 429 that goes back to Promtail, which we throw for rate limits and stream limits, will automatically be retried.
Okay.
So it depends a bit on the agent that you're using or the client that you're using. I don't know that behavior is the same.
I'm using FilmBit with the Go plugin at the moment.
Okay, that should retry.
Okay.
That's going to be using mostly the code out of Promtail anyway, if you're using the plugin version of FluentBit.
Okay. Thank you.
I made a couple notes there. Yeah, the per stream rate limit is new, and as Owen said, so what we've discovered is, and what Jean-Christophe is talking about is, you can remove labels and combine streams, and that's good because that will help you fill bigger chunks, and it can be helpful to reduce cardinality. I put an example in here where there's some cases we have pods with multiple containers, and the container is a label, and it has to be because it sources from separate files, but a lot of times we never search for the separate container logs, so we're going to remove the container label from some of our workloads and just combine the multiple containers into one stream per pod. That may not fit for everybody, but it does for some of our use cases. So it would help consolidate streams a bit. But when you continue to consolidate streams, you could find yourself in the opposite situation where you have a stream that's sending multiple megabytes a second, and that could be too much for an ingester. So I think we put the default at 2 megabytes per second. Is that right?
I think we're 3
megabytes per
3
second
right now is the default.
Yeah. So we have and there's a burst bigger than that. So I guess, be aware of that if you're rolling out. And you can adjust that limit up. It's just there, like most limits, to sort of prevent your cluster from tipping over when things get hand. Yeah, the other thing you didn't mention, or you mentioned, Owen, but I wanted to re-mention is we're going to change this label too, I think. But the way the ordering works is we accept, if you send us something at the current time, you can send something that's older than that up to the max chunk age divided by 2. So you can't send sort of infinitely variable timestamps, because it just becomes kind of unrealistic for Loki to sort and order those and store those, because your chunk would have a start and end time that was huge, and it would not play so well in the query path. So you can still load older data. It's a differential between, for any given log stream, the most recent sample that it's received, and then nothing can be older than max chunk age divided by 2. So we're still working on how to make that a little bit easier to understand, because I'm not sure that I just did a very good job there. But all right. Any other questions on out of order, or feedback or thoughts? Nice. Danny, I think we basically got through your updates. Is there anything else on recording rules?
Yeah, ironically, the question was out of order. Yeah, no, all good. I'm done.
Nice. So yeah, recording rules, super exciting. This implementation is really good, Danny. The like you were talking yesterday, like the amount of code we didn't have to write for this is really nice. It largely uses the Prometheus code for the write-ahead log and reading from the write-ahead log, and a lot of durability. So this is going to be a pretty reliable way to get metrics out of logs. Very excited. All right, what do I have next? Index gateway. I don't remember how much we've talked about the index gateway, so I put it on here. What the index gateway is, so the BoltDB shipper data store uses BoltDB. No tricks there. BoltDB requires memory mapped files, in order to work. So what that had created is a situation where your queryers now needed to be have access to persistent disk. So in a Kubernetes environment, that means running them as a stateful set with attached PVs, and it makes them both more expensive to run and sort of more tedious to manage because stateful sets are a pain. So the index gateway is a new component that you can optionally run, which handles the management of the BoltDB files themselves. So when you run the index gateway, you can provide the queryers and rulers with an address to it, and then having them, instead of them downloading the BoltDB files themselves, they just go query the index gateway. The index gateway effectively acts as a remote BoltDB. So it's like a BoltDB over, maybe it's gRPC actually, not HTTP. But so now you can run a few of them. They're not terribly sophisticated yet, so they don't, do any kind of sharding or, the like. So we run, 2 or 3. I mean, you want 2 for high availability. You might want more if you have a lot of index query load, so that they can share that load. But they all end up downloading the same files and basically making the index data available to the queryers without the queryers having to download those files. So that can save you on a bunch of operations type stuff. So I don't believe this has made it into the distributed Helm chart yet. It is in our JSON. It should be pretty straightforward. You just run the thing, and there's some configs about, the similar configs, I believe, that apply to the query and like how much data for it to download like ahead of time. You can tell it to pre-download data, but then the queryers just need to know where it is, and it should work. All right. Anybody have any thoughts or questions on index gateways?
I was typing a little bit, so apologies if you already said this, but that makes it a lot easier now to run queryers because they're no longer stateful, or they don't need. You're not incentivized to have state in the form of indices pulled locally.
At the moment, in the Helm chart, the queryers are stateful set. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think any of us have updated the Helm chart yet. So largely the community maintains the Helm chart. Our production workload is JSON based, so that usually gets more attention from us. But at some point, we'll probably circle back around if nobody in the community beats us to it.
Okay.
All right, Owen. Query scheduler.
Yeah. So the query scheduler is a new component in Loki. This is something that we've pulled in from Cortex, which is our upstream dependency, and it basically breaks apart what is formerly known as the query front end into 2 components now. The query front end still exists, but when running with the query scheduler, the query front end is horizontally scalable and is only really responsible for query planning for requests and merging responses. And then the part that maintained the per tenant queues is now split out into a component called the query scheduler. And we suggest that you run 2 of these for HA, but you don't really need to run any more, probably for any reasonable cluster size. And it holds the number of kind of in-process or in-flight requests and keeps per tenant queues for them. Previously, the queryers themselves would reach out to the query front end to pull requests off of these queues, and now they just do it via the scheduler instead.
Yeah, the 2-second history here on the front end and the queuing, it's a fairly naive implementation. So it creates a queue per tenant, and it's designed to add some fairness across tenants so that not a single tenant can dominate all of the queryers. So everybody gets a queue, and you can control how much goes into a queue. We run 2 of them so that there's high availability. However, they don't communicate between each other around what's in the queue. And so what would happen is if you tried to run 3 or 4 or 5, you essentially add 3 or 4 or 5 queues. So it kind of increases the amount that anyone can put in at the same time because they have access to more queues as the traffic is round robin. So that's not terribly desirable. So this solves that problem by separating out the queuing element into a thing you can just run a pair of. and then you can add multiple front ends, which can be advantageous because, like Owen put in here, they do the merging part of queries. So sometimes they handle a lot of data depending on the types of queries. And if you have lots of active query traffic and tenants, so you might want to run more of them. And now you can do so without impacting the queuing aspect. It's reasonably short, I think. An explanation.
Yeah, that was a good description. Thanks.
It's not bad. 2.3.1, just a bug fix, patch fix thing. Going to try to do that soon. So if anybody is listening to this in the next few days, has something that they really would like to see fixed into a release version, I don't know the best way to find me. I don't know how to help you. Probably you can add a comment to this doc, or just go in pub Slack. Probably would be a good way too. And I put a note in here because I don't think I've merged this PR yet. I'm still kind of figure out the exact verbiage we want to use, but the stale bot that we use, I just wanted to mention quickly kind of why we use it and the change to the message and the idea. So stale bots are kind of an awful experience for anybody that's ever come across one. You find yourself having a question or a problem, or even opening a PR, and if nobody looks at it, in our case 30 days, the stale bot starts coming after you, telling you it wants to close the ticket. So we use it because there are a couple instances that it's actually very helpful for us. Primarily, that's when someone that created an issue or a PR no longer maintains it or supports it, or is sort of not responsive. So it simplifies our kind of takes care of us having to go find somebody and ask and maybe even nag to see if they if it's still broken or whatever. So it's sort of nice for cleaning up. However, I do want to balance that with the sort of bad experience. So so the stale bot has a nicer message now, but what that message is really trying to say is like, we don't an issue being closed doesn't mean we're not going to fix it or we don't care about it. We do try to go back through when we look at issues. We do sort them based on the thumbs up on them. That's the best way to get something attention, is thumbs up an issue. If they're thumbs up and they have the stale label, we can filter on that, so we can find things that were closed by the stale bot to look to see if they're still relevant, or what. And there's two other labels that we use: the keep alive label if something is worth having the stale bot ignore, right? Like it's an important enough issue, or enough people ask for it, or it's something we're going to work on very soon. And then another one we introduced called revivable. The idea behind the revivable label is we close issues sometimes just because it's not likely it's something we're going to fix in the short term, or it's an interesting idea and we're not sure what to do with it, or it just falls into that category of like, it doesn't quite make sense to leave it open because it kind of leads to the open issue count, and it's hard for us to get a good idea of like how much stuff we actually have to deal with. So we'll close something and mark it as revivable, indicator that like there's nothing wrong with the idea or the problem. It's just something we aren't going to be able to deal with in the short term. So go add thumbs up to it, and we'll sort by those two. My 2 cents on the stale bot. So that's all we got on the agenda. Is anybody anything else?
I just wanted to ask about the retention.
Yeah.
Are you running that in production yourself, or is it something that is very alpha and you are not using it yourself? Because I remember seeing that the PR for that is closed. So I tried to pick up a build and try it.
Yeah, so
with no success, of course.
We are running it. So
okay.
As of last week, all of our production environments have it.
Okay.
So it is still marked as either beta or experimental, just because like we haven't quite figured out how to mark features consistently yet. But it will make it in. I don't know if it'll be in 2.4 or the following release as like officially released, but we are running it. We are using it. It seems to be working fine for us. Like we've not noticed any bugs or problems. So, but by all means, if you have any trouble, you said you did have some trouble getting it to work.
I picked up and just, I think, changed the image for our compactor, if I remember correctly. And didn't change the image for the rest of them. I thought the rest of the component can run the official image. And I picked a build that I can't remember right now what was the tag, and put that for the compactor. And I was getting some error messages about some DB name or something, but I got distracted and didn't spend much time on getting to the bottom of it.
Okay.
But if you are running it, for sure it is working. I need to sort out what's going on with our environment. And
Okay.
there is no need for, there is nothing about how new the data is, right? Because we have data from way long ago that we just kept updating Loki itself and kept the data. But all of them, I think, is that a schema V11.
Okay. Yeah, no, there shouldn't be. The only thing I can say is I think we only implemented support for the compactor-based retention with the Bolt DB shipper index type. So if you had a setup that was using like Cassandra or DynamoDB, the compactor won't. Well, the compactor-based retention won't apply to them. I don't remember if it warns or errors. It won't help you with retention on those. So you have to be using the Bolt DB shipper type.
Yeah.
But
so you can clean up some data which are older than the parameter which says how long back you can query your data. Like it can be applied to 6 months data, for example. Okay.
Yeah, so the compactor-based retention, the reason I specify that is previously retention was handled by the table manager. You don't actually need a table manager anymore. We need to get that in a more public sort of documentation way. But the table manager historically was mostly used for stores like Dynamo and Cassandra, where we would have to go in and manually create tables and things. Now the Bolt DB shipper manages its own tables. So then the table manager was just used for retention. But it was only used for retention on the index ever. You always had to do retention on the objects within the object stores themselves with like TTLs. So the compactor-based retention now goes through the index, and it's like a two-stage process. It'll mark a bunch of things based on configuration that you provide, which can be just global retention for an entire cluster or on a per tenant per stream basis. So you can say, for this tenant, I want to have, these label matchers have 30 days, these have 90 days, these have 2 years. And so it will go through and read those rules and read the index and mark chunks for deletion. And there's a separate file it stores for that. And then 24 hours later, it will come back through and read that file and go through and delete all of the chunks that were marked for deletion. So it's kind of a mark sweep type operation. And that works, like I said, against the Bolt DB store and should allow you to have whatever retention that you would like on a per stream and per tenant basis. And that's, I think, a reasonable. Oh yeah, nice. Thanks for some docs. Nice. Thanks for the question, Masad.
You said 24 hours. It's not like the 2 hours delay when you put in the queue and you wait that if you change your mind and you consider that you put something in the delayed queue, you can do it. It's 2 hours or 24 hours?
It's 24 hours, but so technically speaking, you could. So it's not like we designed support for being able to change your mind on retention. So you could. So one of the things I would recommend everyone do is run revision history on your index files. You can on the chunks too if you would like. The index is more important, but and it's smaller, so it's not going to cost as much. But you technically could, between when that file is created that marks the chunks for deletion and when they're actually deleted, like go save them or delete that file. However, the index, I believe, is already pruned, so you wouldn't easily be able to query those chunks without recovering an index prior to them being pruned. So the entries are removed from the index and then put in a separate file to then be removed from the object store, if I remember correctly. The experts on this are not on the call, though, to keep me honest if I'm wrong, but I believe that's how it works. So so what I would say is, like, yeah, there are possibly ways, if you found yourself, different than this is the ability to do manual deletes, which was added also. And if you submit a delete request, similarly, that does take 24 hours to take effect. If you change your mind, you can, I don't know if you can cancel it through the API, but you can definitely stop a delete request from happening if you decided to change your mind before 24 hours. But when it comes to retention, like, it might be possible, but it's not something like we've documented or really tested around or experimented with.
Okay.
But yeah, just in general, having a revision history, because it doesn't cost, like, or doing versioning, object versioning on the index files doesn't tend to cost too much, and it's kind of a nice, at least keep one version of it or something, if something were to go awry. All right, that's all I got on the agenda. Anybody else? Anything else we want to talk about?
No, that was a lot.
Just like a lot of talking just happened, right? Well, thanks. Thanks, Jean-Christophe and Masad, for joining. We love it having community folks join. Been trying to, I've been experimenting with Twitter, so I'm if you're following me on Twitter, I've been joking a lot the last 24 hours, but trying to get more folks, a little more outreach to the call, just to see. We'd love to hear about how people are doing with Loki, good or bad. We're gonna cut the bad stuff out of the recording, but we'd love to hear about it anyway.
Oh, thank you for the good work. We are actually quite happy.
Awesome.
We are almost at the point that we are going to keep it as what we are going to be using for real, for production. So we are pretty happy about it.
Awesome.
Great.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Very happy to hear.
For me, we don't have a large load, but so far I'm happy.
Yeah.
But this week I met someone, I think in FluentBit channel. It was the opposite. He said that ELK had no issues, but he had a lot of issues with Loki. I don't know which one, but I'm really surprised, because in my team we are using both.
Yeah.
And I see my colleague with ELK, they are ELK managed by Amazon. It's always full. They always need to remanage the index and everything, and it seems a nightmare. And so far, the Loki on a mini cube, it's running at the moment. It's running
Nice.
fine.
Yeah, I would only assume that whoever that was just doesn't know what they're talking about. But joking aside, Elastic and Loki do sort of solve some different use cases. Like, if you need a search engine, Elastic is a search engine, right? And it's a killer search engine. So, but if you want to store logs inexpensively, and I will say that the operator's experience for Loki is still not nearly where we want it to be yet. Documentation is sparse. If you're in Kubernetes, the Helm and then JSON can get you going, but we don't have a lot of guides around scaling. We do want to solve this problem. We're not intentionally not solving the problem. It's just, we're a team of 8 now. So welcome, Jordan. Jordan has joined this week to the Loki squad. So and Karen is our documentarian, and so we're getting her ramped up. So the it's coming. So the Loki operator's experience will get better.
Specifically for FluentD and FluentBit, the ordering constraint in Loki has historically been a huge problem for that.
Yeah.
Those particular users, and so we're really hoping that this will cover 99% of the cases coming out of those use cases.
Actually, are you planning to? What will happen to the plugin? Because the FluentBit plugin, at the moment there are 2 plugins. So there is the Go one, which you wrote, and FluentBit one, which the guy from FluentBit wrote. But the FluentBit one at the moment it is crashing sometime for me, so I'm still using the Go one. But I mean, will UD support in the future? I know that that's what is planned, but at the moment for me it's the one which is working much better. Maybe because you have implemented the Promtail code inside.
I
Yeah,
think,
go ahead, Owen.
I think long term the idea is to have less rather than more, because we don't want people to have to understand a bunch of potentially nuanced trade-offs in agent choice and plugin and all that sort of thing. I know we have wanted to deprecate the one that we originally wrote, which was largely built around some of Loki's own constraints, which are now kind of disappearing. And so I would very much like to see us just use the Fluent provided variants rather than have to use our own as well. Once we have a GA release, and ultimately the idea is not just to have the ability to toggle on out of order writes or unordered writes, but to make that the default mode of operation. And hopefully once we get to that point, then a lot of the problems which have historically plagued people getting started with Loki will disappear.
Okay.
I would say also the maintenance burden on that plugin is almost zero, so there's not much incentive for us to get rid of it. So I don't see it really going anywhere anytime soon. So I mean, it's
so two differing perspectives there.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree. So the trouble with all of us for Fluent Bit is none of us are C programmers, so it's hard for us to go in and make the changes necessary to that code base. I 100% agree with Owen. Like if everyone in the community, everyone using it got exactly what they needed out of Fluent Bit, it would just make our lives easier to not have the plugin. But that being said, I don't know that we've had to merge any PRs for it that I can remember. Like, I mean, it's implementation is simple enough that, it's the conversation might become different if we constantly have to do maintenance on it and there's still people using it, like how we can get get rid of it. But I don't know. I guess I don't worry about it going away anytime too soon.
Because it's kind of a competitor to Promtail.
Yeah, I mean, it uses a lot of the same code. I mean, the things that we run into a lot, like the reasons people tend to stick with Fluent Bit, and again, we might solve these problems to where people can just use Promtail, but the ability to send logs to multiple places that are not Loki is the number one thing, right? So, and of those, people really like the ability to send like just compressed logs to an object store for archival. So we've talked about doing that in Promtail. We might do that in Promtail just so that people have that option and they can still use Promtail. Generally, the best experience with Loki should be with Promtail because it's the one we build. But lots of folks use Fluent Bit and Fluent D. And like I said, for those reasons, they want to send logs to multiple places, or they've got an existing infrastructure that they don't want to tear out. Like, so, we're going to make that a lot easier now that the unordered writes work. So retries are not such a burden. And then I know that Eduardo with Fluent Bit tried really hard with the implementation of Fluent Bit natively in C to handle Loki's ordering constraint. So maybe we can circle back around with him now, and he can he can solve it the way he had with others before and improve that experience too. So, but we were not super strongly opinionated on the agent. It's just that there's some advantages to us having the coupling between our agent and Loki, but the API for Promtail or for Loki is simple, and people use lots of ways to send logs to it.
Okay.
And that's a good thing. We like having lots of flexibility there. All right. I think we call it a day here. Everybody think?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.